Welcome to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm Jocelyn Hardrick, founder and president of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the company behind this podcast and other great programs, like Journey to Esquire Scholarship and Leadership Program, which provides $2,000 cash scholarships to third-year law students and internships to second-year law students, along with leadership training and mentors. And Journey to Esquire, the blog, which provides insightful articles to help navigate you through law school and beyond. Find out more on our website, www.journeytoesquire.com. Hi, it's Jocelyn Hardrick, and you're listening to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm so excited for our guest today. We're passing the mic to Cornelius Demps, also known as CC. Cornelius is the founding partner of the Demps Law Firm, PLLC. He's a Fort Pierce, Florida native. And he got his bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from the Florida State University and his JD from Stetson University, where he focused on or had a concentration in the advocacy program, which is a really great program at Stetson. And he's also the president of the George Edgecombe Bar Association right now. So we're going to hear a little bit about that. But for now, welcome, Cornelius. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Jocelyn. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to talk to all the members and just be here today on this, I guess, Thanksgiving Eve.
Yeah, we're recording this the week of Thanksgiving. And we're grateful for you and all our guests, all our sponsors, all our supporters. So we're so happy because this is season 4 of the podcast. And it's the 40th anniversary of the George Edgecombe Bar Association. But before we go into JEBA, which is, what we call it, JEBA, let's find out a little bit about your journey to Esquire. So what made you interested in law school?
Sure. Yeah. So with me, I come from a long line of preachers and teachers. So we kind of joke that at some point with that mix, a lawyer was bound to show up in the family. We actually now have 3 lawyers in the family, myself, and both of my cousins are attorneys in DC. So shout out to Grandma Mary Demps. I guess that plan worked out in the in the end. But with me, I've done a lot of public speaking all my life. I was a Appellate in my church growing up, and I was a lay reader. So if you know about first and second readings, I did that all the time. And then when I got into high school, I started to get more involved in advocacy. So I did debate, and I had the opportunity to compete at the Harvard National Debate Tournament in Cambridge on campus at 14 years old. So I was the youngest competitor in St. Lucie County history and the first African-American to go. And let me tell you, that was probably one of my first major trips outside of Fort Pierce to go to Boston. So when I tell you culture shock, it was culture shock. The weather alone just was crazy. But it was a great experience. I was able to go for 2 years while I was in high school. And then I also did teen court. I was a teen court prosecutor for some time. And then when I went to FSU, I was a member of the mock trial team. I was also a member of Phi Alpha Delta fraternity. And just being involved in the courtroom, volunteering, public advocacy was just always my skill set. I was fortunate enough also to, be a math nerd and a science nerd. So when I went to college, I really liked physics. I ended up majoring in industrial engineering. So I kind of had 2 different paths where I could either pursue a law degree or go into a STEM career if I wanted to when I was graduating. And as all things go, dating someone played a big role in where I ended up going. So I was with someone who had already got into Florida for law school, and she encouraged me to sit for the LSAT. I took the LSAT, scored well, and I received a scholarship to attend law school, first in Orlando at Barry University. And I also had a job offer to go out to New Orleans post Hurricane Katrina to work with Northrop Grumman. They were in the process of rebuilding the ports. So I really had 2 different paths to go. And also shout out to my grandma. She always told us you can never go wrong with more education, right? The more education you get, no one can take that away from you. So I decided I would go to law school and went to Barry for 1 year, was on the moot court and trial team, did well. But I wanted to develop my advocacy skills more. And I had the opportunity to transfer over to Stetson. And that was pretty much my path into getting into law school at the beginning.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you started out at Barry.
Yeah. Went there for 1 year.
Florida's blessed. We have a lot of law schools here, 12 of them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of options, but a lot of students do that. They start off with one school and transfer to another. And a lot of it depends on how well you do, frankly, right? If you do really well, then you can kind of go to a school that may be higher ranked or has more competitive programs. And Stetson has great, great advocacy programs. When I was at FSU Law, Stetson was the one team to beat. We didn't care about any other law school.
Yeah,
We're
we
like,
love it.
as long as we beat Stetson, we're good because they're the gold standard.
Yeah, I would say
I don't think we did beat them though.
Yeah, when I was at Stetson, I would say our in-state rivals were, and for a trial team, probably for moot court too, were FSU and Barry, and then our national rivals was like Georgetown. So anybody who had ever seen a Stetson Georgetown battle, I mean, it was about as contentious as Red Sox Yankees. I'm not even joking. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's good because someone like you've been doing that since high school. So when you said like the debate team in Cambridge, I'm like, this sounds like the Great Debaters. Like, you seen that movie with Denzel Washington and the
I love it. It's an awesome movie, and then every way that they trained was exactly how we trained in high school. So it was exactly the greatest, and that's a great story too about the ultimate debate of down the road. There was a debate that Harvard also hosts every year. That's the W.E. Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington debate, right? What's the best pathways for African Americans to be successful? Is it by them having educational opportunities or economic opportunities? Our high school unfortunately wasn't able to go into our own version of that debate because, like most programs in high school, our funding was cut. So a lot of us were sent over to do teen court instead. So at least I had the opportunity to continue to develop my skills.
Oh, wow. That's great. And so that's one of the things Journey to Esquire is working on, reaching out to high school students, middle school, elementary, because you really got to start early. You have to plant these seeds.
Oh, yeah.
And then, the students can then figure out what their paths are going to be. And the other interesting thing you said was you started out as STEM. And my research has shown law schools are really interested in people who did STEM in undergrad because it's very rigorous. Yes. And so once you learned how to be academically rigorous, you can apply it to different subjects. Did you find that to be helpful for you when you were in law school?
I did. What's funny is like when you're in, here's another reason why I ultimately became an attorney. So when you're in engineering programs, you obviously work together in groups. And at the end, you have to do a presentation. So naturally, engineering, people are very, very nerdy, very cerebral. They love to type the numbers. They love to do the reports. But the presentation, everyone was afraid to present except for me. So I think I hold the record for the most presentations ever done in undergrad. Maybe someone at FSU has passed me by now, but I highly doubt it. But I did find that the training that you get in engineering helps you out because engineering, you're conceptualizing a lot of different theories and trying to apply them to the real world. So, but the one thing I will say is that engineering, physics, biology, they are sciences, which means there is an exact answer, a provable answer that happens over and over again. When I transitioned into law school, that was one of the first hurdles I had to overcome because you have to get used to fighting in the gray, as we like to call it, right? You have to understand both arguments on both sides and get used to just being uncomfortable or be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that was something that, I was in my first year of law school, my first semester, I'd be like, oh yeah, there's no contract here because the person didn't accept. And it's like, well, they kind of did because there was some performance afterwards. You're just like, what is this? This doesn't make any sense. But after a while, it helped out. And the one thing that I will say is, we come from a STEM background because we focus more on the sciences. We don't focus a lot on the writing per se. So that's one skill that I was able to develop better in my law school days. I was able to go through what's called like a legal writing program. It used to be called LEWS, L-E-W-S. I don't know if it's around anymore, but it really teaches you the concept and the understanding of how to write in a legal manner, right? It's, it's not just IRAC, but it's like you have to be able to understand what certain words mean, what certain terms mean, how to understand further definitions of those words, because that ultimately is the skill set you'll develop in law school that you're going to have to use in the real world. I mean, that's how, we have judges who have to interpret, have to do constitutional interpretation or statutes or understanding certain terms in contracts. So that's a skill that if you want to really get ahead in law school, you need to develop that, I would say, at least before you start law school, or at least in your 1L first semester, as much as you can. That's a skill set that I also felt that people with English major backgrounds already had going in, which is why they typically always do better in law school when it comes to the writing side of it.
Yeah. So, I know you've done a lot of appellate practice later, now in your career, and you did it later on. So how did you, going back a little bit, when you graduated law school, so you did all this advocacy, it sounds like you had a great time in law school and you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did.
How did you then decide, what was the path to your first job? How did you decide what area of practice you wanted to do?
So my path, my first job is a little bit unique. So I had done internships at Stetson at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I interned at Gulf Coast Legal Services. I had worked with a couple of private practitioners, a bankruptcy attorney in Orlando at one point. But despite those opportunities, I never really had a chance to really develop an actual path toward getting a job. And I mean, that's one thing, your number one job coming out of law school needs to be to get a job, whatever it is. There's no point in you to make this significant emotional investment, financial investment, and not be able to recruit back on it. So, being a member of the trial team of the programs, they did get me in contact with certain law firms that were looking to hire first-year associates, but just it didn't pan out. And when I was looking for a job, I honestly went to the Florida Bar News, back when they used to post the jobs online, and there was a law firm that was advertising in there that was looking for first-year associates. I had applied for that job right toward the end of taking the bar exam, and then got a call to come in for an interview. Interviewed, they called the school, they called my references, and that was my first job that I got. And I worked at a law firm doing nursing home litigation, Chapter 400 work. Was there for about a year, but I honestly just didn't like it. Having a background in advocacy, I wanted to be in the courtroom more. And one thing you learn in the private world, you really don't fight in the courtroom, you fight on paper a lot, even if that. So what I decided to do was take a significant pay cut, and
big,
a big pay cut, like half. I'm not even joking, like half what I was making. And I had friends who were prosecutors in Newport Richey, which is the Sixth Circuit, West Pasco, and they said, "Hey, we're hiring for prosecutors in Newport Richey, in Pasco County. Do you want the job?" And I responded, "Yes, I do. Where is Pasco County and what is it?"
That's so funny. Oh yeah, because you were from Fort Pierce, so
yeah, I was an East Coast kid. So if you said Miami, West Palm, Orlando, Hero, I knew that backwards and forwards. But the West Coast was literally like the wild frontier for us, because we thought the first West really was Orlando, and we heard about the Buccaneers, but otherwise, Tampa we really didn't. We didn't really pay much attention to. But I ended up taking the job there, being a trial prosecutor. For the first 3 years of my career, and then that led to me becoming an appellate prosecutor, working for Pambani's office at the Attorney General's office. And so, to answer your question, that's really the time where I had to really develop a lot of my appellate skills. As an appellate prosecutor, it helped having a background as a trial prosecutor. So the law, I knew stand your ground, I knew motions to suppress, I knew unduly suggestive pretrial identifications. We have certain sentencing issues like Blakely and Apprendi and issues. I had already dealt with that at the trial level, right? I'd already, been where, we call bullets flying, right? I've been a foot soldier. So at the appellate level, now it was having the opportunity to review what work that prosecutors had done in trials and really see, like, did they do everything right? Did they do anything wrong? Or did they do something wrong, but it wasn't enough to be a constitutional violation so the convictions could be affirmed? And I was there for about 4 years. And those 4 years really gave me a chance to really develop my love for appellate law.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've made really important points. Like, one of the things I didn't realize was how much lawyers write, because we always see it depicted as being in the courtroom and talking to clients, and it's like, no. Like 90% of what lawyers do is written. So you really got to get your legal writing down. This is not like something you can put to the side, because that can really hurt you when you're advocating for your clients if you don't master that. And then the second thing is, I usually tell students, if you want to do trial work, prosecutor, public defender, that's the way to go. You're going to get in court. No one else gets in court the way they do. And it's really hard to take a pay cut later. Really hard. Because you did 50%. I did 40% when I went from the private firm to judicial clerkship. It was painful. But I planned for it, so if you plan for it, you're good. But if you really want to do it, I definitely recommend doing it earlier, because they tend to do a lot of hiring and they're used to training first year people. That's a great training ground. So, now you founded your own firm, the Demps Law Firm. And I know, from your background, you worked in a couple other firms after you left the Attorney General's office. There's a lot of young people now. They're much more bold than our generation. They're trying to start solo law firms right out of law school, 1 year out. So as someone who's been in so many different, employment situations, you've worked for the government, you've worked for private law, smaller law firms, bigger law firms, and now your own law firm. What advice do you have for law students or new young lawyers or anyone really who's interested in starting their own firm?
Don't. That's my best advice.
He's joking, y'all. Don't.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say this, right? So when there is a difference between, I would call, like, legal theory that you learn in law school, and even with Stetson, which is known for being a school where you can develop your practice skills. There's a difference between you doing that in law school as a law school student, and the second you pass the bar exam, getting your license and getting, being out there. Now people are placing their faith in you, their trust in you, their hard-earned money in you. And you have to start really shifting, I think, from what I consider the practice of law to the business of law. And they are two completely different concepts. If you're ever in law school, I talked to my colleagues about this before. It wasn't mandatory when I was in school. I feel like it should be mandatory for everybody, regardless of what you're going to do. But you need to take a class called Law Practice Management. It's very important because you learn the business side of running a firm. And, one of the things that will make your business the most efficient is that you want to be able to really know the substantive law that you're dealing with. Like, you don't want to be a general practitioner. You really want to focus yourself down to a niche practice, whether that's criminal or if it's family law or if it's real estate or personal injury. You really want to get that done. So you really need to spend the first, in my opinion, most people disagree with this, but I would say between the first 3 to at least 7 years, maybe even 10 years, working at a firm, understanding how the law works. Now, if you want to move around to different firms during that 10 years, do so, if you need to grow, because sometimes, some places you go are not a good fit, or the leadership is not that great, or it could be a great firm with great attorneys, but you're just another great attorney in a firm full of great attorneys. You won't get a lot of opportunities given to you. But you need to really know whatever you're doing and, pay attention to the first 3 people you work with. Something my mentor told me is very true, where she told me the first 3 bosses you work for in your legal career will determine the personality that you develop down the road. So I work for, a staunch nursing home defense litigator. I work for one of the best trial attorneys in West Pasco, and I work for one of the best appellate prosecutors out there in the country. And when I went into private practice, everything that they had taught me is what is the mentality that I took into my cases. So even when I went first into private practice and doing defense work, and I was analyzing, cases down to a T and researching and going, hard, even my bosses then were like, man, you're like a bloodhound going after some of this stuff. And I just think back to my times as working for a defense attorney, working as a prosecutor, we're like, yeah, you have to be a bloodhound to make yourself the best you can. But I would really tell young lawyers, like, if you don't want to do 10 years, at least spend the first 3 years kind of understanding how the legal, really how your practice skill works. That's why being a prosecutor, being a public defender, working at the city attorney's office, or a clerkship are excellent, because you get those 3 years to really learn your skills, hone your skills, learn procedure, and honestly, just learn where the courthouse is. There's a lot of people who graduate law school and they get out and their bosses will tell them, hey, take this to the clerk's office. And you might as well tell them to find the Holy Grail in a hurricane. Like they will never be able to find it. It's funny, but it's something you need to kind of give yourself that time. And then like around year 3, year 5, you really want to start, if you're going to go out on your own, you need to start putting yourself in a position to be successful once you go out. And I mean, I can talk about, how to build successful practice, for forever on that point.
Yeah. Well, those are all great points. We just want to touch on it because we want to, I think if you're brand new, just graduate from law school about a year out, there should be a pause before you open your own firm because, and then just like you said, you may have an idea of what you want to do when you graduate, but the reality is whoever hires you first is where you're going to work first, right? So if you want to do big law, but you don't have the grades, well, then you'll probably start in a small law firm or state attorney PD. If you start like me, I wanted to be at the PD's office or legal aid. I ended up at a big law firm because I graduated right after the housing crisis. So everyone had to stop hiring. All the state, agencies weren't hiring. And I'm grateful for that because, it paid well. But then, like I said, you end up taking a pay cut. But the work I did there, very hands-on. I was in court every single week. And I said, you know what I'm going to do is get as much experience as I can while I'm here. So wherever you start, just take on as much responsibility as they'll give you and get as much experience as you want. Because just like you said, education can't be taken away from you once you got it. The same is true of experience. No one can take that experience away from me.
Right. And once you that job, like once you're in that realm too, like don't be afraid to take on the challenging cases very early on because they're going to be hard. They're going to make you, but they will make you a better attorney in the end. Like when I was a prosecutor, I had been a prosecutor for about 2 years when I was appointed as a special prosecutor on a case in West Pasco that involved a deputy who had committed a video voyeurism crime. And so, that's really tough when you're in the office and you're prosecuting, someone from the police agency or the sheriff's department that you work with on a regular basis. So I took that case on, and luckily I got it guilty, in the end. But you have to embrace that. And when I was an appellate prosecutor, I took on a RICO case that involved about 7 different counties and targeting. It was a RICO that was designed to target Indian American families and go after, I guess it's like Indian jewelry. And that's a complicated case with a lot of cultural issues involved in that. But I took those cases on because, I like a challenge. I like to embrace the challenge, but also, that type of work you take on is going to be the crucible that's going to develop you into the lawyer that you need to be. Because when you get into practice and you start your own practice, you're going to get some cases that are going to be really hard to win, really tough, but you have to be able to know that you have a foundation to rely upon that will make you more successful in the future. So, don't be afraid to take on the hard work. And when you take on the hard work, I stress this, don't be afraid to ask for help. You're an attorney. You work with other attorneys. Other attorneys are very smart. Other attorneys are more experienced than you. Don't be afraid to ask for help because, one, you don't know everything. That's what we call the practice of law. There's 30-year attorneys who still call their colleagues to work with them on cases. I have 2 multi-million-dollar cases right now. I'm working with friends in Fort Lauderdale and a friend out of Atlanta on right now because I want to make sure, 1, that we can get $1 million settlement. And 2, in order to get that, I need someone who's been there before. And they can show me, this is how the file is going. This is progressing. These are the questions we need to ask. These are the witnesses we need to be going after. So that ultimately we get a good result, not only for our clients, so that way we get them the justice they need, but also for the viability of our own practice, so we can continue to generate the revenue that we need. So, don't be afraid to ask for questions. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There's no such thing as a dumb question at the beginning of your career. I mean, you have to ask. The law changes all the time. Your judges will change all the time too. Yes. You've got to be able to ask questions for help, when the time calls for it.
So yeah, that's awesome that you have, multi-million-dollar case already. And it's important for people to see someone who looks like you doing that work. I just read recently, there's a study that was done about Black men in law schools and how the rates are really dropping. I mean, really dropping, which is interesting because a lot of people are like, really? Because when you look at the rates of lawyers, Black men and Black women together make about 5% of the lawyer population. It's about half and half, a little more on the men. But if you look at enrollment, it's like 80-20. I mean, it's really low. So, and I'm putting you a little bit on the spot. Any advice for, young Black men that may be thinking they want to be lawyers and feeling challenged, like they're not represented?
If you want to be a lawyer, I would tell you, first make sure that you want to be a lawyer for the right reasons. Like, a lot of people say, I want to be a lawyer because I want to be rich. Well, if you want to be rich, there's a lot of things you can do. That if you want to be rich, you can open up a YouTube channel if you want to, or go somewhere like that. I became a lawyer because I felt like this was my skill set and this is where I was best suited at. And also I wanted to have the financial viability and financial freedom down the road in the future. But, if you want to go to law school, I would say, reach out to people who are attorneys and kind of ask them about, what their journey to Esquire is. And, if you're a Black lawyer, get comfortable with asking, someone who's not Black about those questions, right? I mean, I feel like a lot of my early mentors in my life were mostly white men or men of Jewish descent or Latino women who I spoke to on a regular basis. And then when I graduated from high school, and then I was able to meet with people like Ralph Flowers and Ron Kaysen back home in Fort Pierce, those were Black lawyers. Ralph Flowers was the first Black judge in St. Louis County history. They gave really good advice, and they constantly encouraged me to go forward. But, you have to really decide if you want to do that, because once you start your journey to Esquire, there's going to be, you got to save for, I would say you got to save for the LSAT, but it sounds like that's now coming to an end. So you got to do something, GRE, I don't know. But you got to be able to get yourself mentally prepared for what that's going to be. You have to also make sure that financially you're able to afford it. So if you can get yourself a scholarship, go. The idea is you want to go to any law school for free. So you want to try to get a scholarship. If you can't do that, you want to at least try to apply to a state school first. And even as a Stetson grad, I'll say that a state school is where you want to be, because tuition is just more affordable. You can easily take care of that. Because it's more affordable, it's also going to be more competitive to get into those schools. So if you're going to be then going into a private law school, make sure you apply for scholarships early, grant programs, any foundation programs that they have, and then, really kind of make yourself a pathway for success. The only regret that I have in law school is I didn't do more clinics and internships back home in my hometown of Fort Pierce. As I said earlier that I had done my internship with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Tampa, and my hope was that down the road, hey, maybe they'll offer me a spot. What I failed to realize was there was already a U.S. Attorney's Office in downtown Fort Pierce that was part of the Southern District of Florida. They don't have a full-time district judge. They only have part-time magistrates from Miami who, the joke is they get trapped up there at some point and they kind of get out. But there's a small U.S. Attorney's Office there. Had I decided by summer of my 2.0 year, going to my 3.0 year, I'm going to go back home, live with my mom, and just go here and cut my teeth, I would have exposed myself to the office. They would have known who I was. So when I got ready to graduate, I could have applied. And then I would have had people in the office to say, oh, yeah, we know Cornelius. Yeah, we know. Oh, yeah, he's a hometown kid. Yeah, we need somebody here, that come and do some prosecutor work or some civil forfeiture or anything else. And that would give me an opportunity to go back home to do that. But I didn't do that. I was focused mainly on Tampa and Orlando when I was coming out. But definitely, give yourself a pathway and make a plan of what you want to do next. And the last thing I'll say is this: if you feel like there's an area where there's not enough Black men in the practice of law and more African American males need to be there, or African Americans in general, anyone of diversity who needs to be in that space, and you recognize that, guess what? You're the person now who needs to go into that space and get it done. Don't look at it and be like, well, they need to change this, and you just walk away and don't think about it. It's like, no, they need to change this. I'm going to be the one to change this. I'm going to be the one to encourage, because the truth is, even when you tell somebody, I'm in law school, I'm going to law school, you've already become a leader in your community. And now you are a role model, whether you know it or not. So, don't be afraid to, at least, go into those paths and, spearhead, what you need to get done and trailblaze yourself.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the first Black judge, George Edgecombe was the first Black judge here in Hillsborough County, Florida. And the organization that you're the president of is named after him, the George Edgecombe Bar Association, affectionately known as JEBA. I've been a member for, 9-10 years now, since I was, a baby lawyer. Yeah. And you are at the helm of the organization when it's celebrating its 40th year anniversary. So what do you all tell us a little bit more about JEBA and what you have planned for the 40th anniversary?
Yeah, sure. So, like Jocelyn said, I'm the president of George Edgecombe Bar Association, GBA, as we known as JEBA. We're founded after the late Honorable George Edgecombe, who was the first Black judge in Hillsborough County history. He's also one of the first Black prosecutors in history as well. And our organization was founded 40 years ago to honor his memory and his legacy. He passed away at the age of 33 from cancer. And actually, a quick side note, one of his closest friends at the time was State Representative Lee Moffitt, who found it just really discouraging that when Judge Edgecombe was treating for cancer, he had to leave Florida to find the treatment. It didn't make any sense to him. So when he passed away, he was able to fight to create Moffitt Cancer Center, which has had a big impact here. And JEBA has a partnership with Moffitt through the Edgecombe Society at Moffitt, which I'll get to in a second. So it is our 40th anniversary. So this year, we're saying is a year of a legacy of excellence and a foundation for the future. That's my theme. So we're going to honor our 40-year history and all the accomplishments that have happened in the 40 years. We are lucky to say that we have a list of some of the most impressive African-American lawyers in Tampa Bay, from judges of state and federal court and the appellate courts, including the Supreme Court with Justice Peggy Quince, who's on the Florida Supreme Court. We have several successful attorneys in the area, trailblazers in our community, leaders in academia like Jocelyn. We have tons of people around here, and that's something that we really need to have a year to celebrate. We're still kind of in what I call COVID recovery mode, where we're trying to get everybody to come out and get off these Zoom calls and these TV calls and come together. So this year, our goals are pretty simple. Number one, we want to spend the year to celebrate. So we're having events throughout our CLE programs where attorneys come and get education advice. We also on Facebook Live, at least every other month on the first or second Saturday of the month, we have what are called GLEs, which are free webinars where we expose members of the community to different areas of law that otherwise might not know about. So wills and trusts. We just did one on homeowners' property insurance claims following Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Nicole that had a huge turnout. We have another one coming up on employment rights as well. And we're going to do one on a small claims court process overview, which will probably be in the spring at this point. So we're doing that. Number two, we're trying to build a stronger infrastructure for JEBA going forward. So we are starting the George Edgecombe Bar Foundation this year. And the goal of the foundation will be to really give JIBA the financial support that it needs going forward to make a bigger impact in the community using our 501c3 status. And lastly, one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to honor the legacy of one of our past presidents, Teresa Jean-Pierre Coy, who was well known throughout, I would say, Florida, not even Tampa. I mean, she had a huge impact on the community. We lost her actually earlier this year. She passed away earlier this year. So with our partnership with the Edgecombe Society at Moffitt, JIBA is currently raising a $5,000 donation from the membership and the leaderships and the past presidents that we will make toward a research fund that Moffitt has toward breast cancer. That research fund is going to be already funded at $75,000. Once JIBA makes our $5,000 donation, they will rename the fund in her honor. And that's going to be a huge impact, and that's the goal that we're trying to make this year. But, come with us and celebrate us this year. We just had our JIBA Young Lawyers game night at one of our members' house. We played every game imaginable. It was a great time to come out. And otherwise, we have our Christmas party on December 10th. We have our Black History Month reception in February. And in April's Friday, April 21st, we're going to have our 40th anniversary gala at the Hilton in downtown Tampa. Tickets are going to be, they're $125. They're $100 that we're going to reduce down for members of the judiciary and for law school students who want to attend. It is black tie. It's going to be a great event, great music, good time to come out and celebrate. So if you want to help us with that, please reach out to us, and we would love to have your support this year.
That's awesome. That's a long list of things. That's a busy year for you, especially as a solo practitioner. And I always call JIBA fam. Because, the important thing for me about bar associations is they create community. Lawyers, especially if you're a litigator, very adversarial nature. Everyone you talk to, you feel like is against you sometimes. Even the people you work with, they're all busy. Everyone's kind of in their own silos. And organizations like JIBA create kind of a home base where you can go and be encouraged and supported and inspired. When I go to the JIBA galas, and you see all those Black attorneys and all those students and and then the whole legal community coming out to support too, people of all backgrounds who support and recognize the importance of us coming together as a community and lifting each other up. Really outstanding experience. So I definitely recommend, if you're in Tampa in April or any of those other months, come on by, come to one of the events, see what it's all about. And we want to thank Cornelius Demps for coming through and sharing your story, your journey to Esquire, and all about the George Edgecombe Bar Association and the great things you all are doing this year. So for more information, go to journeytoesquire.com, and we will see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to another great episode of Journey to Esquire, the podcast. Support, share, subscribe. And for more, visit www.journeytoesquire.com.